Good morning, everybody. My name is Dana Miller, and I'm the marketing specialist with JER HR Group. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Attracting Talent with an Effective Compensation Plan, with Renee Martin, and she's a senior consultant with JER HR Group. And I'm going to let Renee change my slides for me.
Yes.
So the purpose of our webinars is to just share some timely topics and tips with you on a monthly basis, and just to let you know what our services we have to offer and some of our products. Okay. JER HR Group offers executive and staff compensation analysis, leadership development, HR consulting and technology, talent management, assessment tools, and human capital management solutions. And they have offices in New York City, Greensboro, North Carolina, Raleigh, and our new office in Des Moines, Iowa. So I'd like to introduce Renee. She has been with JER HR Group for 3 years. She delivers strategic solutions for corporations, nonprofits, and academia in the areas of compensation, performance accountability, change management, human resources, best practices. And she has a niche for implementation of performance management processes, change management, and professional leadership development, and helping to improve organizational performance. She is in Memphis, Tennessee, with her husband, and the home of Graceland. So Renee, take it away.
Well, thank you, Dana. Good morning. And yes, it is the home of Graceland. I even went there to get my COVID vaccine. They had a drive-through by Graceland. So that was kind of
cool.
Interesting. Don't get to see that every day.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you, Dana, for that great introduction. A very timely topic today, building an effective compensation plan. As I'm sure you've seen, the job market overall, or possibly within your organization, job hunting is definitely on the rise. The job market is getting pretty hot, so a very timely conversation for us to have today. So just out of curiosity, we know the job market is heating up. If you could put into your chat, I'd like you to take a guess at what percent of US workers you think are looking for a new job?
Renee, I just launched the poll on that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So I'll give people a minute or so. Oh, we're getting some good participation. Let's see. Any more? We got 85% participated. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So can everybody see that? Oh, shoot.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Hey.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you, John. So it looks like 40% wins out in our poll. About half of you think it's around 40% of workers that are looking for a new job. So this may be a little bit surprising that this would include actively seeking a new job, as well as some of our passive job hunters. But we're coming in at a hot 65% of employees, which seems incredibly high. However, it is backed up that nearly 9 out of 10 company executives say that they're seeing higher than normal turnover at their organizations. And really some of the reasons noted are that a lot of workforces are just very tired and they're looking for a change. So that's not necessarily, anything to do with that employer, but certainly the pandemic has not helped us in that way. People are getting burned out. However, the biggest reason for the job search is still better salary. So the conversation we're having today is very, very timely. Better salary is still what's noted by most people looking for a better job. Specifically, that boils down to 46% of women saying that that's why they're looking for a job, and 34% of men still cite pay as the main reason for moving to a different position. In addition to that, so pay certainly is number one, but in addition to that, about 75% of workers are factoring benefits into their decision about whether to stay or leave. And really benefits, when you think about benefits, and this is what we'll dive into in a minute, it really is your tangible benefits, so health and welfare benefits, but it's also things like flexible schedules, opportunity to work from home, mobility opportunities. People want to be able to do their work in a flexible way that works with their families, essentially. So we're definitely seeing that continue to be the trend. So a lot of different ways that you can engage your employees through an effective compensation plan. What workers want, this I thought was very interesting. It takes more than a 20% pay raise to lure most employees away from a manager who engages them. So if you have managers that are really engaging your employees, that's really going to help you in the called the war on talent. So let's think about compensation and benefits, and also making sure that your managers are well trained and are presenting or working with your employees in a way that shows them they're valued. They're a big part, your managers are a big part of the communication process. So we're going to talk today about how to build a compensation plan, an effective plan. And then it's also, it's leadership conveying that to the employees, but it's also the managers specifically who are having those, conversations more often about career progression and things like that. So you want to make sure that your managers are completely plugged in and know how, what the culture is, what the message is that you want to have come across to your employees. So with that said, an effective compensation plan, we're going to look at market competitive pay, so what's going on in the outside world. We're going to look at internal equity, and part of this gets into pay equity based on race, based on gender. So I'll keep it light on the surface on those topics for today. That could be a whole webinar in itself, but we will talk about that. Competitive benefits, and then career growth and learning opportunities. So employees have been very clear that they're deeply valuing non-monetary benefits like flexibility, like career growth, well-being, and opportunities to upskill. So we're going to take a look at each of these areas specifically. So to be market competitive, when we work with an organization to conduct a compensation study, things that we are looking for is we're going to look for organizations that are similar in work, similar in mission to your organization. So if you're doing your own data mining, you're going to be looking for organizations, and you likely know who your peers are in your area, organizations that do a similar work, possibly have a similar budget. We usually pull in data from peers that have 1/2 to 2 times the revenue of the organization that we're pricing for, just to give you a span. And we try to keep that median revenue just around where the organization is that we're doing the study for. You're also going to look for similar geographic location if possible. This is something where we certainly, we have information to be able to geographically adjust data. So if you're based in North Carolina and you've got other organizations that do similar work and they're based in Washington, D.C., for example, it's easy enough to do a geographic adjustment to pick up the cost of labor in your region as opposed to where that other organization might be. So don't let that be a limiting factor. From the market data, you're then able to establish salary ranges that are aligned with the market. So now you have a range of salaries that that employees can, they know if you're sharing with them, they're going to know that you're benchmarking positions. Part of your pay philosophy is to be market competitive, and then that's something that can be shared. Compensation strategy really is going to be this is where you determine as an organization what your pay philosophy is going to be. And a lot of companies will say, we kind of want to match the market, and that's where we're comfortable. We also have other organizations who say, in our industry, we really need to lead the market to be able to attract and keep the talent that we really need. So maybe we're going to target at the 60th percentile or somewhere between the 60th and the 75th. So definitely there are organizations who choose to lead the market. We've also worked with organizations who lag the market, and they do that purposefully, knowing that they can offset it in other benefits. So they might decide to lag the market in base compensation, but they pay a lot of the premium for healthcare for employees, and they offer a lot of flexibility and work from home, scenarios. And maybe they make it a really fun place to work. So they find ways to offset that so that it doesn't, so that it still allows them to attract the talent and keep the talent that they need. So salary ranges. What's important to understand about salary ranges is that you're going to come up with a minimum, midpoint, and maximum for the range for the position. For the range. And the midpoint really, if you're targeting the median, you want to match the market, for example. You might use the median of the market as your midpoint. Okay, and then that will help you create the minimum and maximum off of that. Normally there's about a 30 to 40% spread between the minimum and maximum. And that really, especially in those lower level positions, we want to keep it pretty tight so that you're paying competitive to market, and you're recognizing that a lot of those roles are going to turn. People have opportunity for advancement. They're going to grow rather quickly. So it can be a pretty tight range at those lower levels. Higher level positions, people end up staying in those roles for extended periods of time, just growing and developing and adding more value to the organization in that same role. So they're going to have a larger spread to them. But the example that I'm showing to you now is in that 30 to 40 range. So the minimum, you're looking at your emerging talent, they're still learning, maybe they're fresh out of college. Those are the types of people, or fresh out of school, whatever's required for that position. Those are so the minimum is going to be for people who meet the requirements, but they're at the low end of that, and they're still learning. The midpoint is what you're going to target for your fully proficient employees. So people who have been in the role, they've grown, they're completely proficient. They're going to come in around the midpoint. And then the maximum really is reserved for people who are expert in their field or expert at their role, and also able to mentor others. So that's kind of how you're going to look at where within the range to target your employees. Specific to so that's market competitive. So what we've talked about so far is how you benchmark the market, how you look at external factors relative to the pay for your organization. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit into internal equity. And of course, this is something we hear a lot about today in terms of pay equity. We hear it in the workplace, we hear it in the news, and rightly so. There are inequities that have been systemic and have lived in our organizations or in our country, in our world, for a long time, and they are being addressed. But internal equity, you really want to be able to instill confidence in the structure that you put in. So once you've identified the salary ranges, the way that you communicate that to staff is going to be important. The way that you put together your policy and your strategy and communicate that to employees, even down to the compensation procedures so that it's understood. And I just want to be careful here. I know that transparency can be a very hot topic. It's a little bit scary for leaders at times to make sure they're not, sharing everything, and that there's, room for them to manage accordingly and rightfully. So I want to be careful when I say transparency. It isn't, here's, we did a study and here are all the results, bam. It really is a way of refining the message to employees from that. Okay, so internal equity, I want to focus on the last bullet here, which is really around auditing your pay decisions and making sure that you're doing that on a regular basis. So spend a little bit of time. I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about pay audits in just a minute. I want to continue on the track of showing you what it can look like to convey your compensation procedures to employees. So first of all, talking about the hiring salaries, certainly that's going to be dependent on qualifications, and you're going to determine where in the range that candidate needs to sit relative to other staff that you already have. It is important for employees to understand that if there's an annual salary review. So again, this is a sample. This isn't, me telling you how you need to set up your procedures. This is just a sample, but you're going to look at annual salary reviews to make sure, and this is often what you do after your budgeting process. Maybe you do a review process at the end of the year or twice a year. This is just letting employees know so that they know what to expect, that you go through a goal setting process, then you have, weekly check-ins, then you have a review mid-year, and then you have one at the end of the year, for example. And in that time, when they're actually, evaluated, and they're going to know, based on feedback and everything else that they've gotten throughout the year, they should be able to tell which kind of category they're going to fall into, whether they're exceptional, proficient, marginal. And then these are kind of ranges of what they might expect to receive in a merit increase. Could be a 6% for a top performer, 3 to 4% for proficient based on your increased budget, which right now we're trending around 3% as the average merit budget for 2022. It's shaping up to be around 3%. Marginal performers, you might be looking up to 2%, if that, but it's also after completion of a performance improvement plan, because you don't want people to be sitting in that category very long. Then there are also certainly opportunities for promotions and increases to salary at that time. It's going to consider performance, qualifications, and usually that's off cycle, to the annual review process. And then equity adjustments. So this is where, as you're doing your internal audits, if you come across pay inequities, this is just a time where you would do kind of holistically do all of your equity adjustments at one time. So that's a sample of what your compensation process could look like. I do want to shift back into auditing pay for equity, just because it is such a hot topic, and I would feel like I'm not sharing enough with you if I don't spend a little bit of time on it. So auditing for pay, it is important to understand that on average, women in the US are still earning only 82% of what their male counterparts are making. You look into data for women of color, Latina women, it's worse, unfortunately. So the racial and ethnic wage gap has definitely widened over the last decade. Given the pandemic, women unfortunately were disproportionately impacted. And this is just because industry sectors where women are employed are more concentrated, concentration of women working in those industries, and those industries haven't weathered the storm very well. So that could be retail, that could be restaurant, specific industries that tend to have more women. And women also carry more childcare responsibilities. So the telecommuting has been less available for the types of positions predominantly held by women, and this has certainly, impacted the inequity that was already present. Just a couple regulations to be aware of. Certainly the Equal Pay Act of 1963. You would have thought we would make more progress since then, but we're still looking at quite an inequity. I think the important thing to note is why you do them, and it's really, to be legally positioned well legally, because you really don't want to find yourself in a position where employees believe that there's inequity and maybe they file a pay equity claim, because really it gets just very expensive and, negatively impacts your brand and your reputation, which of course makes it even harder to recruit. So it's much better to fix it up front, which is where our best practices come in. So right off the bat, you're going to want to establish legal privilege to make sure that anything that's discoverable remains privileged. And then as a best practice, reviewing those salaries annually and really being able to group employees. So if you have pay grades, this is where you would, look at a pay grade of employees and then filter that down using, you're always going to have the white male as kind of your baseline. And then everyone else you're looking at, if they're paid lower than that, why is that? And certainly there are some acceptable reasons for it. There may be differences in education, skill set, performance, tenure. So there may certainly be reasons for it, but you really want to make sure that you're not just brushing over that, and that you really do understand if there are any systemic biases, that are factoring in there. So again, this is not meant to be a full class on pay equity because there's a lot of detail in that, but I at least want to touch on it so that you're keeping that in mind as you build your compensation plan or revise your compensation plan. So we've talked about competitive market pay. We've talked about internal equity. The third area that I want to touch on is growth opportunities and making sure that career paths are clear to employees. So you might not have a specific path as in sit in this job for 2 years, do well, and you move to, the next position. So it's not quite like that, but you do want to make sure that you're talking to employees about their career aspirations. And, as managers, you want to make sure your managers are encouraging, but also realistic. So if the skill set is not there and that person is not developing toward a promotion, that's valuable information to share as well. So we want to be realistic and honest here. And then for the manager to be able to, if there is a path forward for growth, really being able to share with the employee what their current job grade is and what's the position that they could grow to next. What could they feasibly look at growing to? And then what upskilling opportunities are there through professional development, maybe stretch assignments. A lot of new types of projects coming down the pike in our changing environment. Maybe there's some stretch assignments that that person would be a good fit for. So they're still in their role, but they're taking on a project or an assignment that kind of spans them across departments, stretches them, and then you're providing coaching with timely feedback to them. You're going to share positive feedback, make sure that you're still encouraging them, but also share constructive feedback so that they know what adjustments might need to be made. Okay, so when we talk about sharing with the employee their job grade, it could be, and here's an example of a salary structure. So this has band 11 through 4 is what I'm showing you. For example, if you happen to be meeting with a program coordinator who's a grade 8. So we're sitting right in here in the pink section. You're meeting with your program coordinator, and you could share with them the range for the position. Of course, if this would be a company-wide sharing of information. So make sure that, you know, we don't want managers one-off sharing this when other employees don't have access to it. So this is an organizational decision, just to be very clear, of how much information is shared with employees. So you may be meeting with a program coordinator. The minimum for their range is 45. This is a fresh graduate just moving into that position. So 45 is where they are. But you're sharing with them that the market target is 60. So as they grow, as they progress in that range, there's room to grow pay-wise. Similarly, if you were meeting with an accountant who has, you know, maybe they're at 58,000 already. They're completely proficient in their role. There's still room to grow. They're not at the maximum, but they're close to the target. You could be sharing with them, hey, it is possible to grow to a senior staff accountant, and that gives you continued opportunity for, so there's still room in your range, and there's also an opportunity to grow into the next level grade, into that grade 7, which has increased opportunity for pay as well. So those are the conversations that can be, when they're done well, can be very encouraging to employees, can show them that growth path, and, you know, make sure that they're staying engaged with your company and with the job that they're in. So that is just a sample there. And so I've done a lot of talking. So we've talked about market competitive pay, internal equity. We've talked somewhat about benefits and things that you can do from healthcare benefits through non-monetary benefits, and then also career growth. And I would love to see what questions might be brewing in our audience.
Thank you, Renee. That was very insightful. And like you said, it's a timely topic. So if anybody would like to stay on afterwards and ask questions, I will unmute you, or you can type questions in the chat box. The next slide, Renee.
Yes.
Thank you. We do these, there is a question in the chat box. Can you speak to golden handcuff strategies for exec retention? We have a 457 deferred plan, but are looking for other ideas. This is Gabrielle. Let's see.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
Hi. Hi, this is Gabriel.
Hi, Gabriel.
Hey, I was asked to come off mute, so I mean I can just reiterate the question, I guess. We have a 457F plan, which is deferred compensation to try to retain our executive leadership. So it vests, you know, it doesn't vest fully until retirement age.
Okay.
But I was wondering if there are other sort of, I think they're commonly called golden handcuffs, you know, incentives to keep executives in their same spot without having to giving them cost of living increases every year, which become unsustainable.
Okay. Do you have pay increases that are salary increases for the executive? Okay.
Yeah, so all of our staff get, you know, either staff are on a scale, and so that they get increases tied to that scale, or they get cost of living increase. But with our executive team, you know, towards the top end of the pay scale, we just don't find it sustainable to give the same level of increase to people at the top end. So they're getting a reduced sort of cost of living increase, but they're getting these 457 bonuses, which are deferred comp.
Right. Okay. Yes, I do. I appreciate the question, Gabriel. And there are, I think the 457 plan is a very good way to do that. That's a great vehicle that you have already. What we sometimes see organizations doing, especially in a time where you want to make sure that those key, you know, high-level positions are retained and turned when you want them to turn as an organization. So it is possible to do, I've seen organizations do retention bonuses, not, you know, not to your whole executive team, but if you have a critical 1 or 2 positions that you needed to do that for, that's a possibility. Also lump sum merit increases. So you do want to make sure that, you know, they're in those positions for a reason. Hopefully they're very strong performers, and it sounds like they are if they're at the, you know, higher edge of that pay range. You want to make sure that they are incented to continue performing really well for your organization. So even though you might not add much to their base pay, if they're already pretty maxed out, certainly does not impede you from doing merit increases that are given to them in a lump sum fashion, or it could be performance bonuses. So you want to make sure, because if they're really at the top and they're not seeing much in their base pay increases, you want them to know that they're still getting, you know, that cost of living somehow. So that could be done in a lump sum. And then you may decide to do a performance bonus type of scenario in addition to that. So those would be my main suggestions.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Charlene has a question as well. How much does, well, Charlene, you're unmuted. You can talk.
Yeah, so I have another question too now. But my first question is, how much does a compensation study normally cost, and how long does it take?
Very good question. And the answer is really going to be dependent on how many positions you're having evaluated. So the size of your organization in terms of number of positions, and what all you want included in that compensation study. So I've really seen them run the gamut between, you know, for just a few positions, it could be around 10,000 or a little less. If you're doing a whole organization with 50 different positions, it might be, and you want us to look at benefits as well, to look at competitive benefits, that could be up to, you know, up to 40,000 in range. So those are, you know, I realize that's a big range, but it really does depend on number of positions. and what the roles and responsibilities are of those positions, and how much information you want. If you're looking at base pay, if we're looking at total compensation, if we're looking at total cash, including bonuses, so really how we're presenting that data and how much of a dig of data it is.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful. I know it's a large range, but we're happy to certainly meet with you offline and talk about your organization specifically.
Okay, and so we're a nonprofit, and a lot of our income or revenue is driven off of a particular federal grant.
Mm-hmm.
So like we get the grant for a 3-year period. And so like, do you have any suggestions for doing a compensation strategy when, like, you know, for 3 years you have a finite amount of money, you know what I mean?
Right. Do you find that your operating budget sways drastically from 3-year period to the next 3-year period?
No, not really, because the state hasn't.
Pretty stable.
I have gotten this grant since 2012, and
Okay.
and since then they've only made maybe one adjustment into the top amount you could get for the grant. You know what I mean? Like the state is not, even though the cost of living is going up and everything, they haven't increased the amount of funds that we could apply for.
Okay. Well, I think in that case, you know, again, I'm a big fan of building performance into your process so that you make sure you're getting that value. You're getting a return on the investment that you're making in your staff. So even if it's you have to know what your average, budget is for increases, but I would definitely hinge it on a performance to the greatest extent that you can, so that you're paying, even if you had a 2% merit increase, that way at least people on the higher end can get more. Your people on the lower end of performance are getting less of that pay, and you're able to, make your budget work for you.
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful, and we could certainly take questions offline, if you wanted more specific conversation on that. Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go to the next slide, Renee.
Can you see the next slide?
Yep.
Oh, you want one more?
Thank you. That's great. So we do have these webinars every third Friday of the month. And if you do not already receive our emails with the invites, stay on afterwards and complete the more information request form, and we will get you signed up to receive the emails. I will also send out this webinar schedule for the rest of the year after the webinar today with the recording. Next slide, please. So next month we have Michelle Mott, another senior consultant. She'll be talking about 3 simple strategies to lead your team. And November 19th, Matt Cross is going to be introducing a new human capital management solution that we have. He's with Training Network, and in December, we're going to take the month off and start fresh in January. Next slide, please. So again, once you close out of the webinar, you'll have a tab that pops up where you can ask more or request more information. There's different topics on there. If you'd like to talk, to get a call, John Wing will be happy to talk to you about any of the topics listed. He's on this webinar as well. And you can just sign up for our emails if you don't already get them. Again,
And
stay
do we have
on,
our contact information in there?
yeah.
Do I have mine or can I put it in chat?
Oh, you can put it in chat. That's fine.
Okay. I'll do that real quick.
Okay. Again, stay on afterwards. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask Renee your questions. Again, thank you very much for joining us this morning and taking the time to learn more about the compensations and what you can do to keep your employees. Have a great weekend and thank you very much. We'll see you next month.